the biggest expectation was for me to find a husband and get married and have children. And I didn't follow that tradition. I'm very Italian American, but I did not follow that tradition. So for me, I was looking for the women role models in my family that were doing things in the external world, and there were a few. But
Mm.
I think women in general just thought our voices tend to be put on as a footnote, and I'm trying to move it to the center.
Hi, and welcome to the Well Woman Show. I'm Giovanna Rossi. This space is for conscious, ambitious women who lead with ease, sustain themselves with joy, and create impact by trusting who they are, not by pushing harder, but by listening more deeply. Today's conversation is one I've been really looking forward to. I'm joined by Giovanna Capone, a writer, poet, librarian, and filmmaker who shares my name, by the way, whose life has been guided by creativity. Giovanna is the creator of the documentary Finding the Italians: A Granddaughter's Journey, which explores Italian immigrant history in Oakland through personal story, cultural memory, and lived experience. In this episode, we talk about organizing your life around your creative work, going slowly without stopping, and what it means to be visible as a woman and an artist, even when fear and anxiety are present. We also explore ancestry, women's voices, and how telling your own story can reconnect you to community, purpose, and self-trust. Before we begin, I want to share something special. This March, The Well Woman Show is celebrating 10 years of being a podcast on NPR. 10 years of conversations about leadership, burnout, creativity, and change. 10 years of honoring women's voices, women's stories, especially the ones that don't always get centered. As part of this celebration, I'd love to hear from you. What's an episode of The Well Woman Show that stayed with you? What conversations helped you see differently or trust your next step? You can share in the comments, find us on Instagram at wellwomanlife, or send us an email. We're reading every message. Starting in February, we'll be counting down our top 10 episodes from the last decade, the conversations that shaped this show and this community. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into the conversation. I'm speaking with Giovanna Capone. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you, and I can't wait to get into our conversation. It's really fun to talk to someone with my namesake, so we can say our names lots throughout the whole show.
Yes, I don't meet too many other Giovannas.
Yeah. So I wanted to get started first, Giovanna, with asking you, who are you in the world today?
Well, I was thinking, when I was preparing what I was going to say today, I mean, the organizing principle of my life since I've been an adult pretty much is my creativity. I write and edit books, poetry and prose. I'm now in filmmaking. I've done collage art. I've done lots of creative stuff, a little bit of playwriting, but mainly that's what kind of organizes my life and keeps me motivated. And so I'd say I see myself as an artist in the world, and I use my art to help change and impact the world, maybe to leave it a better place by the time I'm gone.
Mm, beautiful. Well, Giovanna, let's get into, as we heard in the introduction, you have a varied background. I'm curious, you know, how you transitioned from being a public librarian to being a filmmaker.
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't say I transitioned. I would say my library work kind of informs everything else I do.
Mm.
I mean, it's given me some skills for research, that's for sure. But I think, and this is kind of an odd thing for a librarian to say and a writer, a lot of people aren't reading books as much as they used to. And I'm in the book world. However, I noticed things are going audiovisual, like especially with all these streaming services, Netflix, etc. people are sitting home watching movies, but they might not necessarily be reading a book. And they're still reading, yes, but I think the world is going audiovisual with YouTube, with all kinds of short videos for educational and entertainment purposes. So being a librarian is my career and it's my interest, but being a writer and a filmmaker is kind of my passion. And
Mm,
so my library skills have definitely informed my creative work.
yeah. And your creative work has really helped you live the life you want to live. Do you want to say more
Yes.
about that?
Yes. Well, more like I had to set up the rest of my life to support my creative work because
Mm,
I remember being in college and I knew I wanted to write. And I said, I don't care if I'm a waitress, I'm just going to work so I can support my writing.
mm.
And being a waiter is a fine job. It's hard work because I've done it. Um, so I really wanted to organize my life so that I could support my creativity. And at this point, maybe it's the most, beneficial the way I have my life organized now to my work, my creative work. And it's still not easy,
Yeah.
you know. But like I think I go a lot on my own steam, although I do have external supports too. But I have to definitely rely on myself and have a few plates spinning in the air. My financial life, my creative life, my social life, everything, my family life, all of those things at once. And sometimes my creative work has to take a back seat. That happens to all of us.
Yeah. Well, so Giovanna, you have written a lot and now made a film about your experience as an Italian American and the larger experience of Italian Americans. What was it about that called you? I mean, did it start as very personal and then you decided to speak more broadly about the Italian American experience? How did that unfold?
Well, basically, as I discuss in the film, I started this project a long time ago when I was in librarian school, San Jose State University. I was studying for my master's in library and information science. And I did a project. In my personal life, I was looking for Italian American community because, as I mentioned in the film, I was raised in New York on the East Coast. I came out here a bunch of years ago, and I love it out in California. However, pretty soon after arriving, I realized that I had kind of disconnected myself from my Italian American community back east and my ethnic hub that I was immersed in as a young person. And so when I got out here, I felt this cultural disconnect and I just felt adrift culturally. I was like in New York, where I was raised, every other person is Italian and there's a deli on every corner. And out here, it's a different um, assortment of cultures and people. So I was really feeling lost. And that's when I started looking for the Italian social clubs. I had heard about them and I started looking for them. I was simultaneously in school getting my master's in library science. And I decided to do a project for my master's degree on one of these social clubs, the Colombo Club in Oakland. And that kind of set everything off. I started interviewing some of the elders in the club, and I was getting the story about when it was established in 1920 and why it was established and how it's transformed over the years. And so I was collecting a lot of information on that particular club. And then many years later, this film has kind of been a work in progress over a number of years. And in a way, I didn't even know I was making it until it kind of crystallized as a project. But although I didn't know I was making it, I was kind of making it unconsciously because all these things were available once I started deciding, yes, I'm going to do this. And so, in finishing my graduate degree, I finished that project. I had interviewed some elders in the club, got these amazing testimonies and stories from these older folks that about the relevance of the Italian social club in their life. Mm. A lot of people that live in Oakland don't even know these clubs exist, because they're kind of under the radar. So later on, they started having big birthdays, like the Colombo Club turned 100. The Fratellanza Club, which is another club in Oakland, they turned 92. And I started noticing, wow, these clubs are having big birthdays. I should take that old footage out that I did interviewing people for my library school project and do something with it, like maybe make it into a real film. Mm. And then, so originally it was going to be about the Italian social clubs. Then I realized you got to give the historical background of why these clubs exist and what was going on in the world when they were formed. Because if you don't, it's just going to look like the Italians came to the United States and set up these clubs and have these social centers, and they've been having a ball ever since, which is not the story. Yeah, it's not the story at all. So I knew I had to put the context, the historical context. And out of my own interest, I've been doing reading over the last 30 years about Italian American history. And I have a great passion uh, for the unrecognized voices in the United States, like Howard Zinn talks about the ordinary people and the contributions that they have made, which often get overlooked. He has a book called The People's History of the United States, and he talks about the lesser known perspectives on history and just the contributions that ordinary Americans have made and how he tries to capture that. It's not just the mainstream story that we keep hearing about in our American history classes. There's a whole bunch of people that have been left out of that and voices that have been eclipsed by this mainstream motif that we've all been fed. So I have the same interest in giving voice to a diversity of voices, and especially the ones that are least recognized. So
Yeah. And, that's so important to do that with the Italian American experience for all the reasons you just stated. Mostly for me being that, yeah, that you just don't see the story being told in a mainstream way alongside the other stories that we, hear and read about.
right, and there's a lot of misinformation about us, like partly because of all those mafia movies. Ugh. As Lawrence Destasi, he was a historian, and I knew him personally, and he's written a couple of books that are fabulous contributions. Um, but he would say, well, there's three stereotypes that we get known for: power, pasta, and passion. The gangster and the food and the passion, right?
Yeah.
And we hear so much about these gangster movies, it just becomes, movie after movie after movie,
Yeah.
Italians being gangsters, and it's like a real ethnic profiling in a way. So
It is because there are so many more interesting stories about, and I mean, you have them in your own family. I have them in my family,
yes,
of the real people who really struggled to make their way, to this country and then build their lives in this country.
right, exactly. It's true of a lot of immigrant groups that don't get the recognition they deserve. But since I'm Italian American, I was particularly interested in our story. And also, as I mentioned in the film, I had these two aunts, my Auntie Carol and my Auntie Anne. My grandmother Rose came from Italy when she was a teenager. And my aunts would constantly tell us the stories growing up of my grandmother and my grandfather and how they came over and what happened. And my grandmother was part of her childhood. She was raised in an orphanage by the nuns, and because her mother died in childbirth, and she ended up in an orphanage. She asked to go to the orphanage because she thought, well, at least I'll get an education there. And she did. She learned to read and write. And then she came over here. It's a long story. She was brought over here pretty much in order to marry my grandfather, but she didn't know that at the time, and she was underage. This is a common story for women of that generation. They're kind of the child bride kind of thing. It's not as unusual as you would think. It's pretty common. So
Yeah.
my aunts would tell the stories of our grandparents, and they got me very interested in family history. And from that, I became interested in the larger story of the Italians in America. And I put all that in the film because I was like, this is my one opportunity or my vehicle, to use to educate people about the story of the Italian Americans. And
Yeah.
I have a quote. One of my inspirational uh, methods is I collect quotes by people that inspire me or that help me clarify my mission in my life.
Mm.
And Nelson Mandela once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." And I had that quote up on my wall. I put these inspirational quotes all over my house, and that was one of them. And I thought, let me use this film as a way to educate people and entertain them, because every time I show it, I've screened it, a bunch of times now. People immediately start telling me their family stories,
Yeah.
and what it reminds them of, and how they wanted more connection with their past and their ancestors. And it's just spontaneous and it's really exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And that's how it struck me too when I watched it. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And I also saw myself in it, which I think is any filmmaker's dream, right? Is to
Yeah,
have
definitely.
that happen. So um, I wanted to share too that my great grandmother came over from Italy and she had 11 children,
Wow.
only five of which survived into, you know, adulthood or even earlier, like teenagers beyond, but into adulthood. And so her first child was named Giovanna. And so, my family, including my cousin who referred me to this film and introduced me to you, let me know that she probably named, or I was probably named after that first baby that didn't survive. And so to look at the story of my great grandmother and surviving through losing all of those children at various ages, and then eventually raising five kids and in the United States. It's just an incredible story of strength and resilience. And because I'm so focused on, of course, women and women's voices in stories, I'm very intrigued about the women's experience in the Italian American experience and telling those stories. And I've been very connected to researching more about possibly what her life was like and all of that and reading a lot about folk stories and folk magic that women would practice, you know, years and years ago in Italy. So I'm curious, Giovanna, if you can speak to, I know your film didn't focus on women, but did you learn anything in the process that kind of any insights into women's lives versus just the general Italian American experience?
Well, as I said, I focused the film by focusing on my aunts that were the storytellers. And that is what kind of inspired me, is just hearing their stories my whole life long. Um, I think Italian women are very powerful in the family. They're the holders of the culture. They pass on the food. Everything I know how to cook is from watching my mother, you know, um, talking to her while she's cooking. It's not like she said, "This is how you do it." I'm just sitting in the kitchen talking to her while she's cooking. And I think the Italian women are the ones that really hold the culture together, and they're very strong. Um, there's definitely a transition from one generation to the next, like I had to find my voice because I was growing up in a family that the biggest expectation was for me to find a husband and get married and have children. And I didn't follow that tradition. That was, I'm very Italian American, but I did not follow that tradition. So for me, I was looking for the women role models in my family that were doing things in the external world, and there were a few, but,
Mm.
you know, I think, women in general just their voices, our voices tend to be put on as a footnote, and I'm trying to move it to the center,
Right.
and part of being in my own film, I put myself in my film because I'm telling the story through my own voice. I do the narration, and, I decided this is really my story. At first it was gonna be the story of the Italian social clubs, but then I decided to transform it and really include my own family history and my own personal story, leaving New York, coming out to the West Coast, feeling culturally adrift once I realized I was disconnected from my Italian American background and having to look for the local Italians. That's my own story. And I decided to tell it, and that transformed the film.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
totally transformed the film. It wasn't just a history film, it was my film. And then I had to get comfortable with being in my own film because I wasn't at first. And the first few times I screened it, I had to see myself on the big screen there, my face and my baby pictures. And
Mm.
it took a little bit of getting used to, like I'm basically a shy person who keeps doing things that put me in front of audiences.
Oh,
You know?
interesting.
So I'm like, "Oh, you just did this, and now you're in your own film." And I had modeled it after another film that I saw that I loved called The Shame of Point Reyes, which is about, a park in Northern California, and the whole area is being taken over by dairy farms, and the natural environment is being changed. And this man made a film about it because he hikes up there all the time, and he put himself in his film, and he's, like, talking and walking around and talking about his experience as a hiker and how he noticed what was happening to the natural environment and the
Yeah.
expansion of the dairy farms. So the way he made his film kind of inspired me to make my film, and I was like, "Okay, you gotta put yourself and your own story in your film." And when I did that, it changed the film.
Right. And it took some courage, really, to do that, I'm sure, considering you just described yourself as a shy person that, didn't really want to do that at first. So I think this is great for listeners to hear who might be out there considering their own creativity and their own story and what their own next step is. And I think that's an inspiration for others.
Yeah, you can't let fear and anxiety become your default. You have to constantly push back against it. For if you happen to be a reticent person or a shy person, but you have a lot to say because maybe you're a creative person, you have to constantly push back and just allow yourself to get more comfort and visibility if you're going to do your work. That's what happened for me.
Absolutely. I'm speaking with Giovanna Capone, writer and filmmaker, and we'll be right back. If you've ever found yourself worrying if you'll ever really make it in the thing you're pursuing, waking up at 3 a.m. with that familiar wave of anxiety, feeling drained, like no matter how much you do, it's never enough, stuck leading in your team, second guessing every move, or procrastinating because moving forward just feels too heavy, then I want to personally invite you into something different. This isn't another do more, hustle harder program. The Well Woman Academy is where you'll be deeply heard, truly seen, and fully supported. It's where high-achieving women like you, who are out there changing the world, come to release the anxiety, burnout, perfectionism, and self-doubt that hold them back. The result? You don't just survive. You get to live your well woman life, a life of joy, ease, and abundance, even when the world around you feels chaotic. This is about rewriting the rules for how we love, lead, and succeed, because it's your time. The Well Woman Academy coaching program opens in 2026. If you want to be the first to know when the doors open and get early access, join the waitlist at wellwomanlife.com/academy waitlist. We're back on the Well Woman Show with Giovanna Capone. She's a writer and filmmaker. And Giovanna, we're going into a segment called Superpowers for Success. And this is a quick round of questions where audience members get to know you a little better. So, the first question I have for you is, what does success in life mean for you?
Oh, wow. It means so many things. I mean, ultimately, it means I get to do what I have to contribute to the world, which is, as I mentioned, mainly my creativity. And I get to get recognition and visibility for it. And compensation is always nice. And also, it means that I find ways to set up my life to allow me to experience my artistic side and basically pursue it, without getting too bogged down in survival. Because we always
Mm.
have to deal with survival. That's number one, as women especially. But
Yeah.
I've gotten to a point finally in my life where I'm doing more than just surviving. I'm really unfolding and flourishing as an artist. And if I have barriers, some of them are the ones I'm self-imposing. So yeah, the rest of the world for sure wants to limit women and wants to limit anybody from an ethnic minority. Um, your reality and your worth is definitely you have to fight for it. But I think in general, some of those are external barriers, but some of them we start to internalize them and they can limit us and we're limiting ourselves. So kind of challenging those internal barriers is part of the whole process.
Yeah. And Giovanna, when did you know you were really good at what you do?
Well, I'm a new filmmaker. I think I'm a good filmmaker. Um, I always knew I was good at writing. I mean, ever since I was
Mm.
in elementary school, I just loved poetry, loved words. I used to have an index box of vocabulary words, and I just loved words. I would break them into syllables and define them and pronounce them. And so I was always into words. My mom passed that on to us. She was a huge reader and loved crossword puzzles. Took us to the library all the time. So we developed a love of libraries too.
Mm.
Um, so I always knew I had a facility with words, but then later I started becoming more interested in film. And largely, as I mentioned earlier, I feel like if you want to get your message across, a book is one way, but a film is an even more powerful way. And so I started becoming interested in the audio visual way of delivering what I had to say.
Yeah. And can you describe a personal habit that contributes to your well being so that you can do everything that you do in the world?
There's a few. I mean, number one is I'm a list maker. I'm always making lists of things I got to do and prioritizing what's most important. Um, I guess a lot of people do that. I try to stay organized. I also focus on getting support from the outside because I definitely need support. Like I have a very good friend who loves my film and is invested in helping me screen it, set up screenings, introduce the film. I have an 87-year-old friend named Lillian who comes with me sometimes, and she tells the story of her grandparents being evacuated from Alameda during World War II.
Mm.
She lived through that time. And so sometimes Lillian will come with me and we'll have a Q&A after the film. And so I'm focused on getting external supports all the time, making
Mhm.
connections with people that I think can help me get screening set up. And the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, I collect quotes from famous people and and I read them all the time to get myself kinda revved up, and one of them was the one from Nelson Mandela, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Love that.
Another one was from Confucius, the, Chinese philosopher. He said,
Mm.
"Going slowly is okay." I'm paraphrasing. "Going slowly is okay as long as you don't stop."
Keep
And
going.
yeah, just keep going and go at the pace you can handle. That is super important because for me, sometimes I have to stop and deal with survival stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Living in the Bay Area, one of the most expensive places in the country, and I have to stop and deal with survival stuff and get the mortgage paid and get my cats to the vet or whatever. And, maybe it's gonna temporarily delay me from other things I wanted to do that day, but that's okay, it's part of the process, you know? And
Yeah.
accepting that. Accepting that you have to manage a lot of things at once, but it
Yeah, absolutely.
doesn't have to stop you or throw you off your track.
Yeah, and I think that's a great message for listeners because this show really is geared towards high achieving women who are up to a lot, producing a lot, doing a lot, and contributing and expressing a lot in the world. I think, historically, women were valued for how we look and how we nurture, right? Like whether or not we have kids and also how we look. But I think more and more we're being valued for how we produce in the world, like what we how productive we are. And that can be a lot of pressure um on the younger generations too.
Oh, yeah, and women get the double duties sometimes too. We're expected to be
Mhm.
the moms and the nurturers and the wives and have a career.
Right.
Like, you're never relaxing, you're always on, and you're expected to perform in both arenas now. That's kind of a new modern
Yep.
woman.
Yep.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So we really want to support women to find those supports that you're talking about and that I talk to people about a lot on this show. Those supports that can really, you know, support you to I don't want to say balance because I don't really believe in work life balance. I think it's a juggle, a constant juggle. And it's just a matter of like, you know, having balls in the air and then being okay when like one of the balls drops, right? So, Giovanna, what superpower did you discover you had only to realize it was there all the time?
Well, I would say, expression, as a way to activate my identity because, as I do these books I edited, books I wrote, a film I made, I'm getting myself out into the world, I'm defining who I am, I'm defining my voice, my perspective, um, my creativity has really activated who I am in the world, and like I said, I'm a shy person who keeps doing things that put myself in front of audiences, so, I've had to I find myself in front of an audience, I've had to find the skills I need to keep moving forward. And I went to Toastmasters, a bunch of years. That helped a lot.
Mm.
Um, I wrote for a grant to do this film. I mean, I was already doing it. And I thought, there might be some money out there. Maybe you should look. And I just Googled funding for Italian American filmmakers. And immediately this uh, organization came up. It was offering money, thousands of dollars. The deadline was in 2 days.
Oh,
2 days, and I just happened to find it, Russo Brothers Film Forum, and they support people making films with Italian American content, so you don't have to be Italian American, but your content has to have some Italian American relevance, and I found it by accident, and boom,
just in time.
2 days. I just really quickly kind of hammered out this, grant request. Luckily, I'm good with words, and I sent it, and I just kinda forgot about it because I just thought, "You just did this 2 days ago, your chances are probably pretty slim." It's very hard to get grants as a filmmaker.
Mm.
And then, lo and behold, it was almost a year later, I got contacted, and, they offered me to be one of the 8 people. So there were 8 people that they selected that year, it was 2021, um, to give a grant to finish their film, and,
Mm.
you the guideline was you had to finish it in a year, and or something, at least a work in progress within a year. So I did that and it really motivated me. And this was when the shutdown was happening. And
Yeah.
so I had time to focus on
Oh,
getting,
good.
getting the film out there. And
Amazing.
yeah,
Okay, well, just a couple last questions here. What advice would you give your younger self, say 25-year-old Giovanna?
proceed even though you might not be sure because you're going in the right direction. And believe that in your gut, you kind of know what you're doing and proceed with confidence. Uh, I think as a younger person, I was doing stuff, but I wasn't always sure. I kind of needed more support or more guidance or more affirmation.
Yeah.
And so I would tell myself now, just do it, just do it. Like you're onto something and you will succeed.
Yeah. Do you identify as a feminist?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
How does that show up for you, and particularly as an Italian American?
Well, as, as I mentioned, I I chose a different life than the one I was kind of seeing many of the other women in my family take, which was to get married and have kids. But a lot of them, the younger generations, also have careers. But I chose, first of all, to go out to the West Coast and totally do my life as a creative person. And so that was one way that my feminism has showed up is just creating my own independent life and um, realizing, understanding the world. Like, women really do have to work so much harder to get the same recognition. And a lot of times we're under recognized and undercompensated. And so I see all the inequity in the world based on race, class, sex, ability, disability. There's so many ways that we are kept down, and you have to you have to work so hard to try to even the playing field for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. I remember going to dinner with my grandfather, Italian grandfather, and great aunts. And afterwards, I guess the dinner was at one of the aunts' houses. And afterwards, all the women, all the aunties, and me, we were all in the kitchen stuffing cannolis, which I thought was, kind of fun. But then I saw in the living room, all the men were sitting around talking and drinking after dinner drink and all that. And I thought, well, that also looks interesting. Why are we all so separate? And that was when I was very young. But yeah, that was one of those moments where I was like, this is not fair.
Yeah, you saw the division of labor and the division between the sexes. I mean, yeah, luckily my mother was such an intelligent, well-informed person, well-informed, and she read all the time and she was always talking politics in the house. Like my sister and I always talk politics, my older sister and I.
Mm.
And we got it from our mother. I mean, she was constantly, you could ask her anything and she would have a perspective, you know, and that just inspired me. Like, she definitely ran rings around any conversations that were happening with the men.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, she's more informed. She
Right.
was always the smartest person in the room. So that inspired me to like learn about the world and have a
Mm.
perspective and have an opinion and be okay with voicing it. And, she was probably my most feminist role model, although she might not call herself a feminist. But to me, she introduced us to the world of ideas and the world of politics and the
Mm.
world of books. And
Awesome.
yeah.
Last question, Giovanna. What are you reading right now? What's on your nightstand?
Oh, let's see. What's on my nightstand? Well, I read a lot online. I'm always reading stuff online, but I was gonna mention a couple of books I mentioned in the film,
Mm.
um, just because this was the one I read while I was making the film. It's called Italian Oakland. Can you see it?
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, Rick Malaspina. He is a friend of mine, And I was reading this when I was making the film. He totally went into the history of the Italian immigrants in Oakland, and he let me have access to some of his fabulous photos that I used in the film. Um, so what am I reading right now? I basically spot read a lot. I read
Yeah.
New York Times all the time. I'm always up on, what's going on politically, but sometimes I have to take a break from that, that too.
Yes. Yep.
Because every time you turn it on, you're like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. We'll put that book in on the reading list. Listeners love to know what our guests are reading, so we'll add that. And
Here's another
yeah.
Una Storia Segreta was a book I was reading during the filmmaking. Larry Lawrence DeStasi, he collected interviews and oral histories of the secret history of Italian American evacuation and internment during World War II. Lawrence DeStasi. So I was looking at this book when I was working on a film because he's got all these great oral histories. I love oral histories.
Oh, okay. We'll add that to the list too. And Giovanna Capone, it was such a pleasure having you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. There was so much more.
I know.
Can I mention one thing about the melting pot?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was reading a lot about the melting pot and how we came up with that kind of motif for the United States. There was a play written in 1908 by Israel Zangwill. He was a Jewish playwright, and he titled his play "The Melting Pot," and it was about immigrants coming to America. And basically, around that time, it was the industrial age, and iron and steel were the main technologies. And so there was this idea of Americans, um, immigrants coming and shedding their old identities when they enter the new world and being forged and shaped and hammered and burned by the forces in the new world and letting go of their old identities and developing a new American character. And that was how the melting pot, he coined that phrase. So we became, a nation of nations or a nation of immigrants. And later, that melting pot motif was seen as a positive thing at that time. People were saying, well, we're not really, blending all so well together when it's not like a seamless blending of cultures. People are holding on to their distinct cultures and identities. So it's more like a tossed salad. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. I was just reading about the more common, more current way to look at it is a tossed salad where people retain their distinct identities. And um, that's kind of the way things went. But even nowadays, of course, there's a huge backlash. There's a huge erasure of diversity and an attempt to dismantle any kind of DEI
Yep.
gains that have been made. And I think it's just really frightening. And it shows you kind of, it's not that different from what was happening 100 years ago, where these immigrants were treated as unwanted, inferior, undesirables. And only, America was made for this exclusive class of people that think everything should be set up for them. Uh, and it's not that different than it was 100 years ago now with this new administration that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I like to talk more about the melting pot and the idea of how many contributions all these cultures make to the United States and how much better we are with a diversity of voices.
Yeah. And really respecting all of the individual cultures and languages. And I agree, like not seeing it as melting together at all, but as all these individual interesting components all kind of getting tossed together.
Yeah, and that should be a good thing. Like John Kennedy wrote a book called The Nation of Immigrants, and he had that outlook of it's a positive thing to have the contribution of all these cultures and these nations. And that's the way I look at it. And that's what I think would be great for us to hold on to. And resist these forces that want to, kind of stifle and suffocate the diversity. No, the diversity is what makes us great.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, that's what makes us great. And Italians have made America great, and many other cultures have made America great.
Yeah. And so we have to keep that keep that focus and keep that front of mind and stay hopeful that we can honor and recognize all of the huge variety of people that we have in this country.
And it makes us stronger. It's a strength, and it's what the rest of the world sees the United States as, the whole Statue of Liberty motif, and just like coming here to add to the diversity and to make use of the opportunity, and that is a positive thing. Um, Despite what's happening with ICE raids and all the horrible stuff that's come down on us in the last year, um, I think the United States basically is a beacon of hope for many people, and the diversity that we have only enriches us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you added that and brought that up. Giovanna, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having this program. It's great. We need focus on women.
That's it for our show today. Remember, if you need support to live your Well Woman life, follow us on Instagram at Well Woman Life. And don't forget, you can catch the show on NPR anytime. Just head to npr.org/podcasts and search for The Well Woman Show. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave us a quick review. It really helps others find the show. I always love hearing from you, so drop a comment or message me on socials at Well Woman Life. I'm Giovanna Rossi for The Well Woman Show. Until next time, have a super powerful week.